Hello everyone! In this class, we're going to unpack the relevance of the story of a high-speed railway to our daily life. First of all, I'm going to talk about it from my own perspective as a Chinese person born after 1990. Then my British colleague David is going to cover mostly the same content, but completely in English. This is going to be fantastic English listening practice, so I suggest you listen several times until you get it all. And now, without any further ado, let's begin the class. 展望未来最好的方式，恐怕就是先回顾下历史。中国现在最慢的火车是什么呀 ？K 字头的火车。但这个 K 字头车还被人称为快车，因为在它刚出现的时候，人们就认为这是中国速度最快捷的列车，就像是现在的高铁的高字儿一样，高代表着它无可比拟的速度。但是谁又敢说它之后不会有像快车一样的命运呢？对于我们普通乘客来说，这是很难想象的。但是对于专业的工程师们来说，他们已经进入世界铁路旅行研究的下一阶段了。很多英文报道说，这个研究是关于 Super High Speed Rail 超级高铁的研究，但实际上用 rail 铁路这个词来形容这个新技术，会有点误导大家，因为这项新技术已经让火车脱轨了。大家这时候可能觉得我故弄玄虚，说这不就是英文叫 maglev 的那个磁悬浮列车吗？上海浦东机场都用了好久了。但是上海磁悬浮列车的速度跟我们今天说的超级高铁比起来，绝对是小巫见大巫。尽管采用了上海磁悬浮列车的一些设计理念，但是除了让列车能够不与轨道摩擦，超级高铁还采用了真空管技术。在这里，我们想要给外国朋友介绍的这个技术，就需要掌握这个词组 pneumatic tube， 这个词组就是真空管。当然，光说 pneumatic tube， 外国朋友还是不明白这是干嘛的呀，所以就可以解释一下什么是 pneumatic tube。The pneumatic tube will create a vacuum, which will, of course, apart from eliminating wind resistance, will itself serve to propel the train forward。真空管是为了消除真空，除了消除风的阻力外，还可以帮助列车推进。而这项技术能帮列车的速度达到每小时800公里。当然，光说数字比较抽象，就可以做这样的一个补充。With that, we're talking about speeds approaching those of commercial jets。我们现在说的这个速度，可是接近民航喷气机的速度。然而，即使是这些火车，也不能代表技术的极限。中国科学家还在投入另外一个模型的研究。在这项研究中，火车速度将达到2000公里一小时，也就是说音速的2倍。让我们在此时再把目光投向另一个历史重要时刻，这个时刻发生在邓小平访问日本的旅途当中。在乘坐日本的新干线列车时，他被当时邻国的科技水平所深深震撼，从而梦想有一天这样一条铁路线也能出现在中国。而现在，我们已经拥有世界上2/3以上的高铁网络，而随着新型磁悬浮列车的推出，全世界都会以中国为榜样，学习新的技术灵感。
If you look back in history at what journalists write at the time of new inventions, they often have a sense that technology has already reached its apogee. People often cannot conceive of anything bigger, faster, or more convenient than what comes with the latest invention. In this day and age, I'm sure in China we all feel much the same about high-speed trains. They are allowing people to cross distances in times that are unimaginably short. Of course, even quicker modes of transport, namely aeroplanes, have been in commercial operation for decades. However, high-speed rail has a level of convenience which is impossible to replicate on air travel. High-speed rail also does not have nearly so great a likelihood of being delayed as aeroplanes do, which are far more at the mercy of inclement weather than trains. So, as I was saying, it is hard to conceive that overland transport could get any faster or more convenient than it is now. Again, though, we must think back in time. What is the name of the slowest type of train in China today? It is trains whose numbers begin with a K, which are today the slowest trains. K, of course, stands for 快车. implying that these were at one time the quickest of the trains available. G, of course, is the number with which today's high-speed trains begin. But will there be a time in the future where train numbers starting with G will be like the K train lines today? In other words, will there be a time when we look back on today's high-speed trains as the laggards of the railway network? Well, hard as that may be to imagine, that day is conceivable. Even as we are still rolling out high-speed rail lines, engineers are working on the possible next stage in the world of rail travel. Actually, to refer to this as rail, 轨道 travel, is a little bit misleading, because this new technology literally takes trains off the rails. That's right, that annoying little force called friction that has for centuries held back our travel across land is finally being conquered in the next phase of rail transport. Already, media sources are dubbing this new train system as the super high-speed rail, or 超级高铁 in Chinese. In fact, those familiar with the maglev travelling from Shanghai's Pudong Airport will already be aware of this technology. But the speeds expected in the next generation of maglev trains will dwarf those of the Shanghai maglev. A prototype of the new generation of trains is currently being tested in Chengdu's Southwest Jiaotong University. There is a scale model there which is more than 40 meters long. The concept takes the idea of Shanghai's maglev a little further. Apart from using magnetism to keep the train from touching the tracks, it will also travel along a vacuum tube, sometimes referred to as a pneumatic tube. This pneumatic tube will create a vacuum which will, of course, apart from eliminating wind resistance, itself serve to propel the train forward. Now, this latest innovation will hopefully enable this train to reach speeds of up to 800 kilometers per hour. With that, we're talking about speeds approaching those of commercial jets. Now, in case any of you are thinking that this is an idea that's just going to stay in the laboratory, these new trains are part of an ambitious project to link the two major inland cities of Chengdu and Chongqing. When the new super high-speed line is laid out, travel between the two cities should take barely longer than half an hour. Even these trains, though, do not represent the limits of technology. Scientists in China are also working on prototypes that may reach speeds of, wait for it, more than 2,000 kilometers per hour, i.e. nearly double the speed of sound. It is worth casting our mind back for a moment to the 1980s. Paramount leader Deng Xiaoping took a trip to Japan and he admired the high-speed rail network there. He dreamed of China installing such a network. Now, China has more than 2/3 of the world's high-speed train networks. And with the new maglev trains due to be rolled out, it will now be the world looking to China for technological inspiration. All this transformation has happened in such a short time. Aaron reminded us of some of his memories of train travel as a child compared to now.
我成长的年代刚好赶上了中国铁路技术大爆发的年代，现在我们能够享受到高铁运输的便捷，但是我也体验过很多80后、90后的童年记忆，那就是绿皮火车。不像是高铁动辄就是连接京沪这种重要的城市，绿皮车很多的线路其实现在看来非常短，比如从北京北站坐到延庆，80多公里的路程需要1个小时的时间。对于孩子们来说，坐火车是新奇的体验，见到不同的人，看到不同的风景。但我记得当时对于我父母来说，那都是苦不堪言的体验，恨不得赶紧下车。那时候啊，我们火车的环境和卫生条件也不是特别好。现在则不同了，高铁上面禁止吸烟，而且有非常高的卫生标准。坐火车真的是能成为不亚于坐民航的旅行体验。另外，铁路技术的革新不只是对于我们旅行速度的提升，还能极大影响人们的生活，甚至是命运。比如在古时候，文人参加科举考试，那个时候恐怕在考试提前3、4个月出发，远的甚至是1年。到达考点参加考试，考试本身压力就非常大，还要应付路上的野兽、匪徒，因此很多考生奋斗一生，可能都没有得中状元的机会。 如果放到现在，路程根本就不是问题。比如现在每年全国非常火热的艺考，尽管有些地方的同学家乡城市都没有考点，但是也不会妨碍大家的考试安排。1个月的考试时间中，你可以看到这个学生会同时途经北京、上海、杭州等等许多城市。很多同学还在2天内能同时完成北京和上海的考试。只要时间安排紧凑一些，这些都是可以实现的，极大地增加了录取的可能性。旅行的便捷也能让学生更好地保持考试状态。不知道这些中国以前的知识分子看到这一幕，能作何感想呢？
Aaron told us that he was growing up precisely during the time when China's rail networks were expanding incredibly rapidly. He tells us how, although we now all take high-speed rail pretty much for granted, he can still remember clearly the green trains of his youth, trains that had been built either in the 1980s or the 1990s. He remembers that train trips back in those days were often much shorter in distance. A trip from Beijing to Yanqing, some 80 kilometers from Beijing, would be a trip of longer than an hour. As a child, travelling on these slow trains was a lot of fun. You saw all kinds of people, you would see all kinds of scenery you weren't used to. For parents, on the other hand, train trips in those days could be a real hardship. They were usually so pleased when they could finally leave the carriage at the end of the trip. In those days, the carriages were dirtier and the general atmosphere was much less pleasant. By comparison, the modern high-speed trains with strict smoking bans and excellent cleaning systems are much nicer to be inside.